Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is the Thinking Atheist worldwide.
You're a church leader. Maybe you're a deacon or a staff pastor, or maybe just a congregation member, somebody who teaches Sunday school. Hell, maybe you're just somebody who shows up from time to time on Sundays. Maybe you're one of those people who goes only at Christmas and Easter. I don't know. But you've been going for a while. And church is a positive force in your life, right? And so is your faith. You love the people at your church. But after years of sermons and songs and all of it, you found yourself sort of disconnected from what the pastor has so long preached from the stage. You've had a difficult time lately trying to decide if you've ever really truly felt a touch of the Holy Spirit, if you ever truly heard the voice of God, if you've ever really been a witness to the supernatural, or if you simply got caught up in the moment when it happened, the fervor, the emotion, the desire to reach up and touch the hand of a divine Father. Certainly it was real, right? It felt real. The Bible says it was real. It couldn't not be real. And you're sitting there during the service. You're about halfway back among the rest of the congregation, blending in, anonymous, partially listening to the message, partially thinking about other things. And you look down at your children sitting beside you, sitting beside their mother, and you're reminded of how important it is to raise good, godly children in this crazy world. There are so many things outside these walls that could alter the trajectory of their lives. Inside these walls, these church walls, inside the walls of your religious home, they seem to have found safety and meaning and purpose. They were raised in church, singing the songs at children's church. You know, the Bible. Now that's the book for me. I stand upon the word of God, the Bible. And the kids talk about Jesus all the time with absolute conviction. They believe in Jesus Christ with all of their heart. They have the confidence that so often comes with youth, unencumbered by life experience or any real voice of doubt. In some ways, you kind of envy them. And the simplistic lens, the tiny lens with which they view their sheltered world. Doubt doesn't even occur to them. Doesn't even occur to them. Non-belief isn't even on their radar. The possibility that it's all a sham is something these naive young minds would never even take a moment to entertain. And you look at their conviction and you envy them. It's so simple to a child. It's the Jesus story, right? The Jesus story of pop-up books and nursery rhymes. The story told in these small digestible pieces just before bedtime. The story contained within their children's Bibles, these colorful books lined with large type text and a whole lot of pictures. There's the picture of Noah sending out the dove to find land after the great flood. There's the picture of Jesus as he feeds the 5,000. There's the picture of Joshua's army blowing the trumpets at Jericho. There's the picture that shows Zacchaeus up in the tree trying to catch a glimpse of Jesus. And then you remember the song, the one that you were taught as a child. Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. Remember it? He climbed up in the sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted to see. And when the Savior passed that way, he looked up in the tree and said, Zacchaeus, you come down, for I'm going to your house today. For I'm going to your house today. Zacchaeus was a wee little man, but a happy man was he, for he had seen the Lord that day, and a happy man was he. You sang the song dozens of times as a child. And at first you smile at the memory. It's a happy memory. And then the smile fades away as you face the realization that true conviction isn't found in the verses of a children's song. It's not contained in the reassurances of your pastor and church leaders. It's not even found within the pages of your Bible, the one you carry with you every Sunday, but rarely even open during the week anymore. True conviction comes from within. And for a long time now, even though you've talked the talk and gone through the motions, that conviction has been replaced with an unpleasant and uncomfortable voice that sometimes seems to suck the joy out of all the sermons and the scriptures and the stories that used to be so reassuring to you. You used to hate that little voice. After all, it obviously was not the voice of God. The alternative was it must be the voice of Satan. It's some kind of a quiet, covert attack on your very soul. And it's something that you once tried so hard just to blink away. Sometimes you'd even physically blink, just trying to clear your head, trying to refocus your thoughts, just trying to get away from it. And that worked for a little while. And then the voice would return, and you'd punish yourself for not having the kind of faith that would repel it for good. After all, somebody completely in tune with God would be able to fend off the advances of doubt, would be able to quiet that voice that whispers in your ear day after day, hour after hour, minute after minute. Now, today you don't hate the voice. You become accustomed to it. It goes with you everywhere. It's always there. When someone prays to bless a meal that human hands prepared, you hear it. When you see a Facebook post calling down prayers for a loved one who's receiving 24-hour care provided by trained human physicians, you hear it. When you're with a family member who talks about God's love before and after they tear each other to ribbons with gossip and division and venom and pain. You hear it when you're driving alone and you see a homeless person holding up a sign, begging for money, the handwritten scrawl ending with the words, God bless. When you see the televangelist wearing clothes that would cover your house payment and still on television employing their congregation members and TV viewers to sow a seed into the ministry, and you will be blessed. You hear it when you see a billboard that asks if you rather go to heaven or go to hell. When you see a friend lose his job in the recession, facing a mountain of bills and personal responsibilities and potential financial devastation, only to have well-meaning associates smile that saccharine smile and assure him that wherever God closes a door, he opens a window. Whenever you hear the president close a press conference with God bless America, whenever you're involved in a group prayer at some event and you find your mind wandering toward other things because praying simply seems like a waste of time. You hear it when you read the details of a school shooting and someone charges that God simply needed more angels in heaven. When you think about what would you do in a crisis if your wife and children might be in a car accident tonight, something horrible like that, what would your first reaction be? What would you do? The very first thing when you got the news. Would you drop to your knees and would you call down divine healing from the God you've always been taught was the most powerful being in the entire universe, able to spin the cosmos into existence with the mere blink of an eye, able to make the blind to see, the lame to walk, the dead to rise again. The one who loves you so much that he killed part of himself just to save you. Would the first thing you do in a crisis be to call out, to call up for a divine miracle? Or would you instead rush frantically to call 911? When you really stop to think about it, do you have what could be called true belief anymore? Or is there a constant tapping on your shoulder, a constant whisper from the dark and the most honest parts of your mind, an inescapable voice reminding you that you speak the language of belief, but for a long time now you haven't really believed? Not really. Not really. Not when you're being completely honest with yourself. Not when nobody else is looking. Not really. The euphoria and the conviction that you once had, the emotionally charged salvation experience that you were convinced was so real, has long faded. And now you're seeing your life, your loved ones, your habits, your traditions, your opinions, yourself in a far more honest light. Maybe you'll continue to dress up for Sunday service. And perhaps you'll keep this previously unthinkable inner revelation to yourself, as everyone around you seemingly enjoys the assurance and absolute conviction that you do not. Not anymore. But wait. But wait. What if there were others sitting in this very sanctuary right now? Amid all these hundreds of people who are having the same thoughts that you are. What if there was someone else who had the same questions, the same challenges, the same doubts, the same inner voice always pinging away inside their skull? What if somebody sitting just a few feet away from you was experiencing exactly the same thing that you were? You'd never know it. You'd never, ever know it. Because like you, this person would look perfectly natural and content and happy on the outside, singing from the songbooks and reciting the scripture verses from memory and showing out a confident expression, the expression of conviction and belief. Like you, they would present to anyone and everyone, family, friend, associate, co-worker, even perfect strangers, as a person of faith, a believer in God. But in the truest place inside their mind, they, just like you, are deconverted. I remember when I started to doubt. I didn't call it doubt. I thought it was an attack or a lack of faith. To punish myself for not having enough faith. What's the matter with you, Seth? You need to have more faith. Pray more. Pray more. What's the matter with you? When things didn't make sense, I decided that, well, the Lord works in mysterious ways. And I'd check out. That little voice in the back of my skull. It was always there. It took me a long time to really notice it or to pay it heed, but it was always there. Early in my youth, it was amazing to be a believer. I'm telling you, there's no feeling like that confidence of youth I mentioned just a few moments ago, when you think you have the answers. Yeah, I haven't lived my life at all. I haven't seen much of the world. I haven't really been anywhere. I haven't really done anything. But I was a clean-cut, well-spoken young man, truly convinced that he had been fortunate enough to be born in the right faith at the right time. And I took real security in that. I felt like, man, my life means something. I'm going to go out and make a difference for God. And then that voice continues to nip away at you. Finally, as you start to get a little older, at least for me, well, it wears you down. And you start thinking, well, all right, what? What? What do you want? Just say it. Right? You're no longer trying to blink it away because that doesn't work. And you've prayed and you've tried to have more faith and you've done all the things the pastors and Sunday school teachers tell you to do. And you've essentially run the gauntlet of all these spiritual tests. You've been given conflicting advice by everybody in your life, desperate to give you advice. You see that their lives are just as screwed up as everybody else's life is. And you come to a point finally after you start listening to the voices of doubt. You come to a point where you realize, wait a minute, I didn't choose not to believe. But I don't believe. I don't believe. What am I going to do? I don't believe. Everybody else around me, what if they knew? What if they heard? What if they thought? What am I going to do with my life? I have been deconverted. I have become the antithesis of what I thought I would be, of what everyone hoped I would be. The nice young man, the good Christian. In fact, I may be the opposite of that guy, at least when it comes to God. He had this mix of emotions. You know, we had a post on the Facebook page about a video that I had done last year called Social Suicide. And it was populated with kind of an elaborate visual package, and then the audio was comprised of the voices of people who had been interviewed over the podcast or in other formats who had shared the stories of their deconversion, their extrication from religion, and how many of them paid significant consequences. I think one of them ran away. Hasn't seen their family since. People ostracized and cut off and all of these consequences. I mean, who would choose that? Who would choose it? You don't wake up one day and say, man, you know, I think today I'll reject everything everyone in my life holds dear and make my life 10 times more difficult than it normally would be in this highly religious culture. That sounds like a plan. No. You didn't choose not to believe. It just happened. Maybe you picked up the God Delusion. It's a book I continue to hear referred to by people in our community, and it's not a cliche. That book was a game changer. It may be, to a degree, a generation changer. I am not exaggerating. It was one of the books that helped me in my moment of crisis, and others are saying the same thing in droves. You didn't mean to go that deep. You were just curious, right? You open the book, you start reading, just to see what he has to say. What happens when the person who holds a worldview completely contrary to yours starts making sense? What happens when someone who is supposed to be the enemy actually makes sense? I remember watching Carl Sagan when Cosmos first aired on PBS in 1980. We made fun of Carl Sagan. Billions and billions. That was all we really knew and remembered about him as kids. I'm ashamed of that because Carl Sagan was a poet and a brilliant thinker and a man who inspired people, and he brought science to life. I'm ashamed of the fact that I was 37 years old before I really discovered the man. He used to be the one that would be mocked at because he believed in evolution. I didn't come from no ape. From goo to you, that's what they believe. No, we've got it right. We're the ones who have it right. And then you read the work of Carl Sagan, and it makes sense. It makes sense. It makes sense. And you shake your head and you go, how did this happen? And you lose your faith. It just doesn't leave all at once, maybe. I don't know. It just leaves. It's gone. And you find yourself putting your trust in an organ you haven't used in a long time, that one between your ears, the one that was told to shut off whenever things got too complicated. When the headlines got too sticky, or whenever things just were illogical, chaotic, stupid. Turn off your brain. What are you doing? You can't understand the mind of God. You're a mere human on this earth. He's God. You don't even try. Just give up the battle and just let it go. Just go with it. Just go with it. No, instead, you engage. You flip the switch, and before you know it, you're like the man who's been in the desert, right? Who stumbles upon the oasis and he drinks deep. That was me. My family members thought I was obsessed, and they are right. I was obsessed. I was pouring through. I couldn't read those books fast enough. Why was I in my late 30s before I'd ever heard the name Dawkins or Dennett or Harris, Dan Barker? I'd never read any Hawking, Stephen Hawking. Brief History of Time? Nah, never read it. Just didn't read it. Now I'm reading Frank Peretti. That's what I'm reading. Books by James Dobson. That's who I'm reading. These lofty love letters to Jesus Christ. Are any of them scientists or evolutionary biologists or genuinely interested in the true answers out there? And they are out there. No, these were just love letters to their God. Then I got angry. Man, I was... I think I was angry with... It's hard. I was angry with my family because I felt in a way I had been duped. But I wasn't angry at them because I felt they had lied to me. They didn't lie. They believed it was truth. Now, the information coming to me was not accurate information. But they were true believers, desperate to rescue a son from hell and to see him enjoy heaven with a reunion of all of us for eternity, right? A happy ending. Who wouldn't want that for their children? My parents wanted that. But on one level, I was just pissed off. God, I never had a chance. Freaking 4 years old, I'm in vacation Bible school already, learning the songs, the recitations, so that I can remember them now. This is branded into your brain. I'm in an elementary school that's a public school in 3rd grade, and we start to learn about cavemen. We're talking about, I don't know, stuff like the invention of the wheel and making fire and those types of things. And of course, my family got a whiff of that, and within a few months, I was enrolled in private school. And in private school, they surround you with people who absolutely agree with the Bible, or whatever private school it happens to be, holy book is, a religious private school. No challenge. Nothing. No, and that becomes your normal. You pray before your lesson plans, and that's normal. And you salute the American flag, the Christian flag, and the Bible, and that's normal. And you dress up in slacks and clip-on ties on Chapel Wednesday, and that's normal. God, I think about it, and I think if I had been taught more how to think, how to explore, instead of taking me out of this environment over here, where I was exposed to other ideas, and placing me in the cocoon, what if I had been given the opportunity to explore, to experiment, to ask questions? Would it have taken me nearly as long to get where I got? Why did it take me so long? Am I a dumbass? What's the matter with me? What did it take? Why did it take this long? I hear similar stories from other people, and I'll share some of those stories with you tonight. Some people beat themselves up because they were 40 years old or even older before they decided, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. And they walk away. I've become convinced that the power of childhood indoctrination is profound. I'm speaking at the American Atheist Convention in the last weekend of March in Austin, Texas, and that's the theme of my presentation. The indoctrination of kids. It's just been something on my mind lately. We're going to be actually doing a long tour. I'm going to be in, I've got a couple of dates in Tulsa, Oklahoma, one in Edmond, Oklahoma. I'm going to be in Amarillo, San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin. Lawrence, Kansas is coming up. And we'll be spending some time talking and interacting with people. I'm looking forward to that. You know, the chance to get together and sort of support each other. It's like a support group, man. Hi, I'm Seth. I'm a recovering Christian. I've been sober since 2008. Hi, Seth. And everybody claps. Here's my 5-year chip right here. It's a little bit like that, is it not? To be deconverted, to have been a true believer, and to walk away from it completely. I look at my life now, I don't even recognize myself. You wouldn't recognize me either. I was an irritating little SO, but I'm telling you, I was Mr. Jesus when I was in my teens and early 20s. God, I probably drove people up the wall. If they see me, these people, I'm already getting some pushback from the Christian radio community. I've had a few emails even this week. One of them sent anonymously, right? It's a bogus email address. You can't even respond. You're a liar. You're leading people straight to the depths of hell. Stop it now. Anonymous. You know, if these people were to take the journey and see me 20 years later, they would be like, who is that guy? That's not the guy I remember. Mike sent me a message. He said, I grew up in a split household. My mother was a devout Catholic, and my stepdad joined the church when he married my mother. I've never really understood where his position with the church is. He's not one of those halo and light people, but he does say things sometimes that make me think he is a believer. I suppose I lost my faith in at least Catholicism at a fairly young age. It actually started with Santa Claus. My parents always told me stories as a kid explaining discrepancies when it came to Santa. We didn't have a chimney, so how does Santa get in? We have a steep roof, so how does Santa keep his sleigh up there without it falling off? And if he's not coming down the chimney, why is he parking on the roof anyway? It didn't take too many BS stories from my parents to figure out that Santa wasn't really real. And my parents were telling me a tale. It wasn't too much longer that I remember sitting in church, listening to the priest go off on one thing or another when the thought hit me that if Santa wasn't real, what else wasn't real? The Easter Bunny? Fake. The Tooth Fairy? Fiction. Jesus? Well, that one took a little longer to answer. But after listening to stories like Jonah and the whale, Elijah's ride in the chariot of fire, and Noah's Ark, I came to the same conclusion as I had about the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, and Santa Claus. The Bible was a tall tale. Mike continues. I didn't go full-on atheist at this point, but something very close. I was still young, so I didn't really know where to go from there. Questions regarding my faith were very frowned upon, and every time I asked, so I stopped asking. I kept looking for something that even sounded right. I played around with Buddhism and paganism for a while. Nothing ever stuck. And finally, it just hit me that the reason I wasn't finding anything out there that was believable was because none of these things were real. I was in college before I finally embraced the term atheist. But I would say I was closer to 6 or 7 when I lost my faith. Mike, thank you very much for the letter. Let's go to the switchboard and talk to area code 630. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who is this?
This is Drew. How are you, Seth?
Drew, thanks for calling. What do you have for us tonight?
I just want to share my story a little bit. I was raised Lutheran, and Lutherans are pretty typical in their biblical theology. They don't believe that the Bible is scientifically or historically accurate. They don't even believe that they are the only correct one. I mean, they believe that they are correct, but they do a lot of ecumenical things. And there were things that I really, really liked it. You know, God was loving, and all you had to do was just say, gee, you know, God, I'm sorry. Just apologize profusely, and you were forgiven. But I remember when I was a kid, I was having a discussion with my father about religion, and he was saying about how nice it is being a Lutheran because you can sin as much as you want, and as long as you apologize to God, you're off the hook. And I was like, wait, what?
It was like a get-out-of-jail-free card for him. He wasn't really belief. It was more like he was working the system.
Yeah, right. I mean, he meant it as a joke. I mean, he is a believer, but you know, I think he's more of a deist / spiritual but not religious guy. So I don't know. I mean, there were so many things like, you know, the Bible's condemnation of homosexuality. I was watching that Moral Court show with Larry Elder, and this woman, the plaintiff and the defendant knew each other. And this woman who was a devout believer was upset because this other woman had a sexual encounter, a lesbian sexual encounter in her bed. And the reason that she was upset by this was because the Bible condemned homosexuality. And I'm like, no, the Bible doesn't condemn homosexuality. And, you know, of course, Larry Elder says, oh, yes, the Bible does condemn homosexuality, but... And I'm like, what, it does? So I looked up Leviticus, and it said... I don't remember the verse specifically, but I think it was man shall not lie with man. And I was like, wow, the Bible does really say that. And I didn't like, you know, the fundamentalists. I didn't like Pat Robertson. I didn't like, you know, Kirk Cameron, Way of the Master. I wanted to vomit whenever, you know, the 700 Club would come on or the Way of the Master came on. And I didn't like the whole personal interpretation, like, oh, that's your interpretation of the Bible. It's like, wait, now hold on a minute. Isn't there one correct way to interpret the Bible? When I really was transitioning, I was on this skepticism website, and I started to notice that there was a high correlation between skepticism and atheism, and I heard just one really good pitch for atheism. It's like, wait, this makes a lot of sense, because I thought an atheist was somebody who could prove that God didn't exist. Well, no, because the scientific method says that the person making the claim, the unevidenced claim that God exists, has the burden of proof, and since nobody can prove that God does or doesn't exist, it's all just a matter of faith. And I remember when I was really struggling, I sent you an email just saying what I was feeling inside, and right after I sent it, it was just like a weight had been lifted off of me.
But do you feel like you finally got somebody to talk to?
Yeah,
it's funny when you realize at that moment that you may not be alone, that you might not be a freak for having these thoughts in a highly religious culture. It's a very relieving and empowering type of feeling, you know. And
I had a liberal Christian background. You know, I didn't like the fundamentalist crap.
Yeah.
I didn't buy into that crap. And to have the candy taken out of your mouth and you don't want it anymore, a weight had been lifted off of me. And I was like, wow.
And you'd never go back? If they told you right now you could take, which one is it, the red pill or the blue pill to go back into the Matrix? That they gave you a chance to go back, would you?
Nope. No, none.
I say the same thing, and some people cannot believe it. Man, don't you miss it? And I'm like, well, there's some things about it I miss, sure, but...
Oh, yeah.
It's not really about kumbaya. It's not about happy, happy, joy, joy feelings. It's more about, is it real? That's the more important question, is it not?
There's a comfort and security in the knowledge that you have the answer. But it was just like, okay, is God vengeful and merciless, or is he all loving and all forgiving? Which is it?
Yeah.
And I think some of them try to do both. It's where that whole, like, God is love, but he is also just.
Yeah.
You know, he loves you with all his heart, but he will kick your fucking ass.
Hey, that's a bumper sticker. Well, I'm glad to meet someone who has crawled out as well and has managed to find his own voice. And I appreciate you kicking off the show with me and sharing a perspective, my friend.
All right, bye.
All right, take it easy. I had a message in from Nina. She said, I became deconverted several years ago when my mom was in the hospital. My Southern Baptist family members kept her alive and left her suffering because they said she could be healed. Our electricity turned off because the tithe was paid before our bills were. I would never go back. I have so much knowledge now. We should do a whole show on tithing. I don't know if we could do a whole show on tithing. It'll be 90 minutes of examples of the same type of thing, but it makes me crazy. You know, those of us in the free thought community who are trying to do something that requires finances, it requires money, whether you're paying for productions, production music, or you're hiring graphic artists or narrators, or whether you're putting on a convention, or whether you're doing whatever. And it takes money to do that. It's not popular to talk about, but it takes money to do that. Well, the church totally gets off the hook, because not only do they get to come to you and they say, please give us your money, they get to throw in and God will richly bless you. Cast your bread upon the water. There's even a song about it. And it will come back to you. Is it tenfold? What is that scripture they used to say? It's pressed down, shaken together, and running over. Let me look it up. Down, shaken together, and running over. There it is. Luke chapter 6, verse 38. This is the one they throw at us. And they'll take people who are destitute, who are not even paying their own bills, who have no job, whatever. And they'll say, give and it will be given to you. A good measure pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. They're using this scripture and scriptures like it to condition you that if you hand over 10%, which is a tithe, and anything over 10% is an offering, it's over and above. Hand it over. It's all God's to begin with. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. That's from the Bible as well, right? Everything belongs to the Lord anyway. You're simply returning to the storehouse what he has given to you. If you do that, it's an act of obedience, and the way the game is played, the way the machine is made, when you do that, it opens the door for blessings in your life. They would have whole services. I'm going to get off on a tangent. They had whole services about people who had tithed and given over and above and were blessed. You know what? I didn't have the money. Oh my, I've heard these almost verbatim. I didn't have the money at the time. We didn't know how we were going to get by. Didn't know who was going to pay for the groceries. We didn't know. But we gave that day. They bring these people up, right, to give their testimony in front of the church. We gave. I remember writing that check on. I prayed over that check. I said, Jesus, bless this. Bless this. And the next day, I got a call from a job placement agency. And they offered me a job that was going to pay twice as much as what I was going to earn doing this over here, or what I'd earned at the job I got laid off from. Or I received a bonus and I had someone pass away and leave me an inheritance. I've heard that one. God, the Lord works in mysterious ways. And everybody's like, amen. I mean, and of course, this confirmation bias now has everybody in the mindset that they're ready for their blessing. Let's give it back to Jesus. For all I know, they could have brought these people in and just fed them the story. Look, I want you to tell that. I don't think that's what happened. I think they just cherry-picked someone whose life circumstance happened to line up with the idea of financial blessing. Somebody happened to get the right call, and they said, oh, this is beautiful. And they brought him up. This is a great example of Jesus working in somebody's life, defying all expectation. Amen. Amen. Everybody does it. And they're writing their checks. Oh, makes me crazy. People having their electricity turned off because they paid their tithes. Jeez. Jennifer sent a message and said, I was at my grandmother's funeral yesterday. In the church, my dad whispered to me, hey, you want to see a historical landmark? That second pew from the back. That's where I became an atheist. Love, my dad. Jennifer, that is awesome. Tell your daddy's my hero. That's amazing. So I wonder how many people actually find themselves discovering that they are deconverted, and they discover it within the walls of a church. It has to happen often, doesn't it? I know it happens with these pastors and ex-pastors. Matt sent me a message. He said, I watched the movie Religulous and woke up. I loved Religulous, by the way, and if you haven't seen it, put it on your must-watch list. I'm not even a Bill Maher fan. I love the movie. It's well done. It's well made. It's well defended. It's wildly entertaining. It's the kind of thing that, I mean, I honestly think if I could get some believers to sit through it, I don't know if it would help or not, but I would like, watch this. It really does a good job of articulating a whole bunch of good stuff. Religulous, check it out. Area code 661. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who is this?
My name's Kalen Turner. I'm calling from Skype. I'm calling to tell my story. I grew up in a house that went to a Unitarian church. Unfortunately, my mom passed away in the year 2007 while I was at university. It was the day after my 20th birthday, so really, really difficult for me. And then the next year at school, I heard from my roommates, who were very evangelical Christians at the time, that my mom was in hell because she didn't believe in their God. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe my confessed friends would say something like that. And I turned to them and said, thank you. You converted me. I'm now an atheist.
Wow.
Been one ever since.
And that was a genuine rejection. It wasn't just an in-your-face to them. You honestly, that was your moment of epiphany?
Yeah, really. And it was really, and because of that, I started looking at YouTube videos. I searched out a group, atheist group at my school, and because of that, I was able to find friends that I actually had something in common and realized that the people that I thought were my friends, the people I was rooming with, were actually just there being my friends because they wanted to convert me and save my soul.
You were like a pet project for them, huh?
Yep.
People tend to group together, right? I'm all about people of like interest wanting to spend time together. But people also enjoy reinforcement. Even back in my old days in Christian school, when everybody around you thinks like you, walks and talks like you, believes like you, prays like you, and you never really know anything different. There's a security in that, isn't there?
Yep. Luckily, I had my mom and my dad were very open about it, and they basically told me, I actually, until recently, never knew what my dad believed or my mom believed. They said, hey, this is what is out there. You make up your own mind, and we'll keep what we believe to ourselves. If you want to know, we'll do it in a discussion. So that really helped. But it's just still this day, I don't understand that concept. How can someone say that to someone who just lost someone so dear to them?
Anything else for me?
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say thank you. I traveled to New Zealand, and at times I got lonely, but I always knew I had your podcast to listen to. So thank you very much for everything you've done. I love your videos, especially the one about what happens if you die, the afterlife.
The
afterlife video. It was very impactful on me, and I shared it with all my family. So just wanted to say thanks.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the call. Take care of yourself. I had an email from someone who was sending in the email as under an anonymous signature. It said, I'm not sure whether I'm submitting this correspondence to the right area. I was wondering if you could help me make sense of what I'm feeling. I guess that I could say that I started my deconversion process more than 2 decades ago, but until recently, I'm thinking I made it worse, rather than making it all of the way out. After much reflection, I saw the Bible for what I believed it was, and I shed the teachings of my youth. I've always had a problem with the way that humans treat each other and continue to do so in the name of God. I wanted to believe that a God existed and shed all human-made attributes and assertions. I am not now, nor have I ever been a creationist. I wouldn't even know what to categorize my former self as. I believed that God and Darwin could coexist, and muddled my head so much that I could still believe beyond negating what religions had concocted. I've been in this mode of thought for so long. I'm guilty of not having previously done any research, just going about my life. A couple of months ago, I came across other individuals in the atheist community, and since then have been engulfed in reading and listening as much as I can. I've become a fan of your podcast, and I've watched almost all of them. I thank you for all the time and devotion you've put into them, and I want you to know that you're reaching people out there. I've come to realize that while I disregarded the majority of everything else, I still inadvertently kept some ideas. By keeping those ideas, I was able to perpetuate the belief. I've come to realize what I am, but I'm struggling with coming out of this fog. I'm not sure how to describe it, but I'm beating myself up for not having the ability to breathe a sigh of relief. I apologize if this was lengthy or confusing. Thanks for the message, and thank you so much for the kind words. What you're going through is something that I'll bet there are thousands of people who listen to this podcast who can nod their head and relate to. I remember devouring secular material, atheist material, science material, whatever material. Burying myself, disappearing into my room, just burying myself in anything and every YouTube video after book, after blog, after whatever I could find, nonstop. It's like I was making up for lost time. I get it. I know exactly what you're talking about. I have people who they're isolated. They are completely isolated physically. And they'll write and say that they queued up all the podcasts and they just listen to them just so they can hear the voice of somebody else who doesn't think they're freaking nuts. I understand it. I had Christopher Hitchens videos playing 24/7 for a while. I understand it. It's natural. I think it's healthy. You know, you've been holding your breath. Inhale. Get some oxygen going up there. It's all good. Now, the discarding of some religious ideas and the keeping of others, I also understand that as well. This often happens in what I call the retreat position, and this is often how non-belief comes to happen, in my humble opinion, as you have someone who is a devout believer. The Bible is absolutely true. God is in the sky. Hell and heaven are real. Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden. Noah's Ark actually happened. Jesus came to earth 2,000 years ago and died for our sins. Amen. And then you start to question and you think, well, wait a minute. This part of the Bible doesn't wash. So you take a step backward and you say, well, the Bible's really true, but some of it's true only in the sort of the sense of the parable. Some of it's not literal. And then you see something else in the scriptures that doesn't really wash. Slavery and those types of things. And then you say, well, some of it was for yesterday and some of it's for today. So not all of it applies to me. And you take a step back. And then you go to church instead of every Sunday, and you go every couple of Sundays. And you take a step back. Instead of praying before you have a meal, at every meal, before you go to bed, wherever, whenever, well, not quite so much. You take a step back. Before you know it, you look up and you realize, well, I don't really hold to the Bible. I believe in God. I'm not a religious person, but I'm a spiritual person. And you take a step back. Now, I think this is where a lot of people end up. For all practical purposes, they are what I call dormant in the faith. You can invoke God, you speak the language of God, you say things about God. But he is like the relative who never really shows up at a family reunion. You really have no relationship. Right? You haven't really seen him, haven't really heard him. You were told he was going to show up. You were told to be ready. You better be ready. He's important, and he never showed. And before you know it, you just stopped caring. You still believe in him. He's still out there somewhere, but whatever. That's where most people land, and they stay there. And I understand it, because the next steps are some of the hardest ones. The next steps are the ones that have, I think, in my opinion, the greatest consequences. And those are the ones where you say, well, wait a minute. Is there the God of the Christian scriptures? Does he exist? Now you're starting to get specific. Now you're starting to challenge, right? Now you're on sacred ground. Now you're really walking on the razor blade. And as you put the science together and the history together, and you see that it's not just false, but it's demonstrably wildly false, well, then you reject the God of the Old Testament, the God of the New Testament. The Christian, the Abrahamic God is now something you do not believe in. You are an atheist about that God. Well, what about other religions? Maybe you examine them and you decide, I don't believe in them either. They're all kind of the same. My analogy is it's like it's going to some Mexican restaurants. You ever go to a Mexican restaurant? Look, order a taco. What's in a taco? All right, you got ground beef, you got cheese, you got lettuce, you got picante sauce, and a tortilla. All right, well, let's have an enchilada. What's in an enchilada? All right, you got ground beef, you got cheese, you got lettuce, you got salsa, you got a tortilla. I'm going to get a tostada, I think. That sounds good. What's on one of those? Ground beef, cheese, lettuce, salsa, and a tortilla. It's the same dish. They're the same ingredients prepared different ways. This is what religion is like. Christianity, Islam, so many of the others. Look, they've all got their deity. They've all got their ritual and tradition. They've got their services, their churches, their holy books. They've got their paradise. They've got their torment. They're all the same dish, arranged in different ways. And you come to the point finally where you think, well, I don't believe in any of those. So now you're right at that precipice. You say, there's something out there. The universe is too big. Things are too complex. There's too much. It's overwhelming. There's no way that it all happened. People like to hang around in that little membrane. Because the step to no God has presented himself or herself or itself, period. The physical world and universe operates exactly as it would as if there was no God. Now you have to say, I don't believe. You're either an agnostic because you think it's unknowable. Some people take that position. And or you simply say, I don't know. Or you say, I'm an atheist. I don't believe. The evidence doesn't support God. That last step is a kicker for a lot of people. If I were you, and I didn't mean to go off on this long tangent, but if I were you and I'm speaking to the person who wrote the letter, look, I think you start small. Don't start with what you don't believe in. You go crazy. All right? Don't start with, well, I don't believe in this, and I don't believe in spiritualism, and I don't believe in animal spirits or whatever. Start with what's tangible. Read you some Sagan, man. Let's discover the world, the solar system, the galaxy as it exists. Let's discover medicine as it exists. Let's discover philosophy, and let's discover the real world. Don't make it a crusade against religion. Don't go out looking for things that debunk your faith. Ultimately, you're looking for what is true. How does the universe work? How do things work? What's the explanation for all this stuff? That's a great place to start. It's a place of discovery. It's an exciting place. And you'll probably dig deep into those books and videos again. We won't see you for a year, man. You know? Once you start with what you know, it's like they used to say, and I don't know if this is accurate, but I love the analogy. They say that people who look for counterfeit money don't study counterfeits. They study the real. They know exactly what a real dollar bill looks like and how the threads are and where the little security tags are and every nuance of that bill as it should be, they know. And because they know that, whenever a counterfeit comes along, something that doesn't fit, they can immediately spot it. Now, I don't know if that's how it is done, but I love the analogy for living truthfully. Let's find what's true. And everything else is just going to bounce off, man. It's everything that doesn't wash, that is counterfeit, is going to just bounce off. You'll be able to spot it just like that. And in the meantime, don't punish yourself for having the same discussion that millions, maybe billions of other people have had. This is a tough journey, but it's a worthwhile journey. And I'm a true believer that a life lived truthfully is always worth living. Area code 512. Thank you for waiting for me. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Hey, this is Leah. How are you doing tonight?
Thank you for waiting. The theme of our show is Deconverted.
Well, in a way, I wish I could say I was, really one of those people that was subjected to evangelical religion, because that's the theme of most of the people you talk to. I was raised, it was sort of liberal, but sort of not. I was raised Lutheran, kind of like one of your callers earlier, which is pretty traditional. But I really never totally believed it, even from the get-go. It always felt like a tall tale. I really can relate to that person who said it seemed like a tall tale. But it wasn't until, I think it was college, that I really felt a moment where I said to myself, I'm not a Christian anymore. I studied theology in college. I really studied a lot of Bible, stuff. I took a class on the Genesis and things like that. And that was really, I didn't believe in a personal God, I think anyway, but that really was the nail in the coffin. Like, all of these religions are the same. I was looking at studying all these different ones and thinking, I can't really say that I'm anything. I didn't call myself an atheist then. I don't even think I'd heard that word.
Now, were you at a Christian university studying theology?
Ironically, yeah. I grew up Lutheran, but I happened to go to a Catholic college. It was just a fluke going to a Catholic college, which did not please my grandmother at all, by the way.
All right. Well, wait. Now you're there. You're studying theology, and you are now at the point where you think it's all crap, and you're surrounded by people who are attending a religious college. Did you feel like the odd person out?
Not really, because everybody was questioning. Well, I should clarify. I was not a theology major. It was part of my electives when I went to college. My major was English, but I thought, I've got all these electives I've got to take. I'm going to take philosophy and theology because I was fascinated. But from an academic point of view, that's the thing. I was always curious. My mom had always encouraged me to think and read, and so I was already the kind of person that thought, well, that sounds like bullshit to me. I was always a science person. So I would read, we had the illustrated Bible. When you're a kid, you have that illustrated Bible for kids.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just like, oh, that's a cute story.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
I saw the picture of Abraham with Isaac and the lamb, and I'm just like, whatever.
Yeah, we did the same thing. What a beautiful story. The ram gets caught in the bush right before they go grab it and sacrifice it. And we're like, what a beautiful story.
Yeah. It didn't really dawn on me until recently. Yeah, that is a really horrible story. When I was a kid, it was just, if somebody had asked me, challenged me and said, do you believe all this? I don't know what I would have said, because it was like, I was just I was just going with the flow. I was just going to church like I'm told to go. And I was confirmed, and I just did it because that's what you do. And actually, I do need to give my brother some credit in this because he was going through the flow too. And so I think I looked up at him and thought, well, if he's just going along with going through the motions, why?
Yeah.
This is all a bunch of...
I hear a common thread, and I want your opinion on this, Leah, but I think a lot of religious parents are terrified when their children go off to college, because it is at college when they no longer control the signals that are coming in, right? Well, usually anyway. Yeah. I think when they send their kid off to college, do you think that terrifies a lot of religious parents?
Oh, absolutely. No, my parents were not really, they weren't really that religious. I think I was going to church. My mom was going to church she was just kind of going with it because that was what she was supposed to do. It's funny, after I was confirmed, I don't think we ever went to church after that, which I need to ask my mom sometime, like, why was that? But she wasn't into it either.
No, I think a lot of parents I think they feel an obligation. There's like the story I told at the beginning where you look at your children and you say, I have a responsibility to have these kids in church. I need to have these kids in church. And parents often punish themselves if they don't have them there because it's part of what a good parent does. And then once
part of the part and parcel.
Once they've seen you walk to the altar and say the salvation prayer and perhaps even get baptized, now they can breathe a sigh of relief, and now they can watch football. I don't know.
Let you do what you need to do. Yeah. Well, see, it's funny. My brother, I don't think he goes to church. I've never asked him if he's a believer or not, but he pokes fun at religion just as much as I do. But his kids go to Sunday school. They went with my grandparents. So. Even though, my brother doesn't go to church, but it may be Christmas. I mean, he probably goes on Christmas. Yeah. But yet he's still, the kids got to go to Sunday school or whichever. I don't think it would occur to him to say, well, no, I really don't want my kids going there.
Yeah, I want to be a good parent. It's just what we do. It'll be good for them to be exposed to this kind of stuff. And I don't have a problem with people going to church as long as you have already framed it in the proper context. Look, I've had some people who... had atheist kids and their friends were religious, and their religious friends wanted to take their atheist teenager to church. And I'm like, well, great. Just, as long as you frame it in the right context. Look, this is kind of what you're going to see. I keep your eyes and ears open. Don't believe everything you hear. Be skeptical. I think if you can get them to the point where it becomes more of a forensic thing, more of an experiment, they can go in and just absorb and see what the culture is like. Then it becomes a conversation piece, and it honestly becomes a moment where they can become educated about what happens in church walls. So. Yeah.
I'm not looking. That's something. I'm actually. I'm expecting my first child in July, actually. And that's something I'm thinking about, like, after the baby's born, what am I going to...
Now, in the Lutherans, do you guys do christening and stuff? Do you have to do the baptism with the oil on the forehead and all of that, or what?
The water, when they're a newborn, and I don't know if that conversation will come up.
Oh, it'll come up. It's going to come up.
Well, I do have an out. I live very far from where I grew up. I don't live there anymore, so I could say, oh shoot, we can't come up and do that. Sorry.
Look, just send me the kid's picture. I'll Photoshop in a finger with some oil on it and on the head. Yeah. We'll just send it in
right
there.
Next to the baptismal, Photoshop them next to the baptismal fount. That'll work.
Look, I've heard more horror stories of grandparents get crazy about the baptism of babies. If you don't have that kid in the queue to go be sprinkled with water or oil, these grandparents, these little gray-haired ladies, have a hissy fit. And I know a lot of people will take their kids in to be baptized just to shut them up. It's just sad,
My mom has joked. She actually joked about that kind of thing. Not taking the baby to church, but just saying, I'll just, baptize the baby myself, something like that. And she kind of laughed, and I didn't really know what to say. I'm like, I just didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
You really, and she doesn't go to church. She's a believer, but she doesn't like the show of being showy and going to church. That's another chink in the, like a brick in the wall when it came to my feelings on religion. Like, well, my mom felt that it was showing off, to go to church.
By the way, congratulations for, did you say June or July?
July.
Well, congratulations to you. Very exciting. And I hope all goes well for you. And thanks for calling the show today, Leah. You take care of yourself.
Thank you. I love your show.
Oh, thank you. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Free thinking parent. I just love it. I just love it. Jake sent me a message. He said, as a child of Seventh-day Adventists, I sort of dreaded sunset on Friday afternoons because it meant I couldn't watch movies or TV, listen to secular music, or spend any money. There were certain loopholes I'd exploit, like nature videos and Christian rock. But that 24-hour period between Friday sunset and Saturday sunset kind of sucked. I didn't like being a captive audience for an hour every week, wearing fancy clothes, sitting in stiff pews, occasionally getting down on my knees until they were sore, and listening to hymns and the hideous sound of the organ. The Bible was boring, and I was frustrated by all the one-sided conversations I had with God that never seemed to improve my life. When I hit a rough patch in my life where I felt extreme anxiety drop on me like a ton of bricks, I began to turn away from Christianity because I felt no relief from prayer. I looked back on how prayer never seemed to work for me, and I began to think that God wasn't there. I started to learn a little bit about other religions and listened more closely to what atheists had to say, as well as giving cosmology, abiogenesis, and evolution more consideration than I had in the past. All the while, church became more and more intolerable until I stopped going and later revealed I didn't believe in God anymore. I can honestly say that I never felt the magical quality of life that other believers described. Though I was scared of encountering Satan or his demons or winding up in hell, I loved belonging to a community of like-minded people and doing fun activities with them, but I was repulsed by everything traditional and proper. What began for me as an emotional response has since evolved into a reasoned rejection of unsupported claims. I have no desire to go back to religion, but I don't enjoy feeling so alone in the way that I view the world either. Thank you so much for the message, Jake. You're really not alone. I think it's important that we scratch the community itch. And while there aren't conferences on every block on every weekend, there are certainly online resources for people to support each other. And I've seen it firsthand in the Thinking Atheist online community. I've seen it in other atheist communities like Atheist Nexus, where people come together and are reminded that they're not alone. They're not isolated. Not really. And if it encourages you, the blog, I think, is still on my website, talking about the rise of non-belief and the statistics that show that the nones, the non-religious demographic, is the fastest growing demographic in the quote-unquote religious category. And essentially non-religion is the fastest growing religion category because there's no other place to put it. That's really encouraging. It tells you that there are so many others out there who have come to the same conclusion that you have and who are gaining courage as they see more and more. It's like an exponential, it's like the snowball is just gaining momentum as it rolls down the hill. Who knows what the world's going to look like, and at least the United States will look like in 10 years. But I'm excited to be a part of what's going on and to see it happen and to be alive at a time when finally a generation, these young people, I put together just a few days ago, I put together the promotional video for the up-and-coming Secular Student Alliance National Conference, which is happening late spring, early summer. It's 2 events, 2 cities. And they contacted me and they said, look, would you help us put the promo together? And just seeing the enthusiasm of these students and seeing what they were doing and the activities and the fact that there are Secular Student Alliance groups that are popping up all over the country. I mean, this is no accident. These are the game changers, man. These are the people who are going to change the temperature of the nation. That's not an overstatement. And if you're a young person and you're a free thinker and you're out there, thank you. That's where it begins. You know, it's probably not going to start with us, with me. Not going to start with our parents. I think largely it will probably start with the people who are going to be the mothers and the fathers and the career people, the educators, the scientists, the physicians, the people who are emerging into the rest of their lives and will help us define what their children and their children, how they're trained. Imagine it. Generations who are taught how to think, who are taught to embrace doubt and curiosity and to look at the world with awe and wonder, and to not start with superstitious answers and to not allow themselves to be emotionally blackmailed by grandma because they didn't have a baptism. They get a chance to try out what works, what doesn't work, to find what voice is comfortable for them, what voice sounds like them. And then one day they grow up and they've got kids and they do the same damn thing. Can you imagine? Man, that's exciting. That is exciting. You are not alone, my friend. And as the months and the years tick by, you will be less and less alone because the tide is really turning. Area code 636. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Hey, Seth, it's Brooke. I've called in a couple times now.
Thank you for calling, Brooke. What do you have for us?
So I went to a private Catholic school since kindergarten, and I never really took it too seriously. You know, I have a gay uncle, so I was always, I was never against gay people or anything. And my friends and I actually, during confession, we would, make up certain things that we did that we didn't actually do just to get, see what reaction we could get out of the priest. So I was never, I believed in God and everything, but I was never really, I just didn't like the Catholic Church. And so I got tired of it after a while, especially after the whole class went to a pro-life march in D.C., and I wanted nothing to do with it. And I was the only one out of my entire 8th grade class who did not go.
So did you ever really believe, though? Were you ever a person of conviction, or were you always the person who just kind of turned the screw?
Oh, I definitely believed in God and everything. I just didn't believe all the junk that they put, that the Catholic religion and the Christianity, all religions just put with it. Yeah, I definitely believed in God. And then one day, it was this summer, I was just bored and on Tumblr and looking up stuff about the Hunger Games. And a video from Lacey Green talking about the Hunger Games came up. And I was like, okay, I'm going to watch this. So I started watching Lacey Green's videos, and her Go Green 18 channel came up on the side with all her atheist videos on there. And so I was just like, what's this? So I just started watching, and I was like, whoa, this girl, she makes sense. And then I became really interested in it, and she talked about Dawkins, and I discovered Dawkins and Hitchens, and it just spiraled into this thing, and then I found you, and here I am.
Well, I'm glad you're here. And what are you? You're a teenager, right?
Yeah.
You're exactly what I was just talking about. We're talking about people who are excited about learning and excited about science and excited about discovering the real world and living their lives with enthusiasm. And you are awesome, Brooke. Thank you so much for your enthusiasm.
Yeah, since I became an atheist, I really have taken an interest in science. I really didn't care about it before. And now I'm in astronomy, and we're learning about how the universe started and everything. And I think it's so interesting. Everyone else in my class is falling asleep, and I'm fangirling over the videos because I recognize certain scientists from YouTube who have talked with Hitchens and everything.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, I'm glad to hear those words, and I wish you the very best, and thank you so much for listening, Brooke.
Thanks.
All right, take care. Area code 732. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Yeah, this is Justin. What's going on, man?
Justin, what's happening?
I wanted to spin you maybe the Cliff Notes version of my story because it took about 15 years for my deconversion to fully go through.
Yeah, tell me.
When I was a kid, I was, indoctrinated with the entire Christ and God and everything like that. And when I became about 10 years old, I started finding these contradictions. I think the first contradiction I actually found was the accounts of Judas's deaths, and that started to get me thinking. And then from there, I started going into the stages, well, maybe the Bible's just outdated. It doesn't apply anymore. Boom, it's out the window. And then it was, religion's just corrupt after, of course, I'd read about the horrible, horrible things that they'd done with Cortez and with the Incas and the Spanish Inquisition, and all these things just made me think, well, religion's to blame. It's just their fault because they're corrupt men. And maybe the true path of Christianity is just to have a personal relationship one-on-one. And I started learning as much as I could about other cultures, other religions, and eventually moved into pagan religions because I felt like, well, maybe the modern-day Christianity is just too diluted with all this, a change in policy over the years. Corrupt men has just came up with, selfish and prejudice and racist things to add into it. And I think the time when I started to, I muddled around as an agnostic for years, and I think the moment that I actually started to consider that there was no God was after I watched a program by Stephen Hawking on the origination of the universe. And I watched it, and I was just amazed. I watched it, and I thought, wow, that is so much more interesting than Magic Sky Daddy snapped his fingers, and it came into existence. It just makes so much more sense, and it's logical, and it's backed up by evidence.
It's a good feeling when you discover that stuff, isn't it?
It's liberating, man. I mean, you get to see things in a whole new perspective. You don't have to listen to people tell you that this is wrong and that is wrong. Why? Because God says so. Well, who is God to tell me when God sends a hurricane and it wipes out millions of lives? Why? Did it kill the innocent along with the God-fearing? Yes. Well, then I'd say God's pretty impartial now, wouldn't you?
My favorite part about those types of stories is that if you know that the God that you're speaking of knows past, present, and future, their time is a non-issue, then all of this stuff was pretty much front and center in his brain before any of it happened.
Right. It's like the story of Abraham. If God knows past, present, and future, why does he need to test Abraham? He already knows the answer. It was a waste of time, and all he has done is put this poor human through insufferable amount of mental anguish.
My favorite one, I think, is Job, where, for some reason, God, the almighty creator of the universe, for some reason gives a shit what his arch enemy thinks. So to impress Satan, he puts Job through the paces and kills all of his children. I'm thinking, well, why does God care what Satan thinks, for Pete's sake? It makes no sense.
I always looked at it like, maybe God was standing there. Hey, Satan, you see my man Job? He loves me. Yeah, but you give him a lot, don't you? What are you trying to say, Job? What are you trying to say, Satan? No, I'm trying to say that if I didn't, I tell you what, Satan, you send a wind down there and you kill all of his children right now. What? Huh? What? Why would I do that? It's
one of the best.
Turns into a comedy skit.
One of the best videos I've seen on it is something I post from time to time on my own pages, and it's the reason I haven't done my own Job story video, because this one is done so well. It's just there's no need to do it. It's called the Goon GOON, the Goon Bible Project. Put that sucker in a YouTube search. It is, I think, about a 4-minute video on Job, and it is brilliant. It is absolutely fantastic. I appreciate you listening and sharing your perspective today. I'm so glad you are deconverted, my friend.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. 920. Thanks for waiting. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Hey, this is Stephanie from Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Hi, Stephanie. Thank you for listening. What's going on?
Well, I just wanted to fill you in on my little story of my deconversion.
I want to hear it. Now, you were a true believer?
Oh, absolutely. Well,
what were you?
Whatever you call it, before the age of 8, if you want to call that a true believer. But, yeah, when I was really young, far before I can remember, my grandparents took me and my 3 other siblings to church, what I believe was a non-denominational church. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, I basically picked my friends over, because of what I believed. If there's a kid who was angry at a teacher and threw a fit, I'd be like, I can't be friends with him because he's a bad kid, he's sinning, and all this other stuff. So I took it to the extreme. And I remember when, I had a friend who was, she had cerebral palsy and she couldn't walk that well. And I remember she actually tripped and fell in front of a bus and got killed on impact. And I remember thinking, why would God do something to my best friend? And I think from then on, I went to church like 5 years after that event, and I just kind of took everything, or looked at everything objectively, and then I stopped going to church, which I was okay with that, but really never really got brought up until I started dating somebody in my high school years, and that's when I actually really started to look into it and, decide, I kind of want to pick a side because I didn't feel comfortable with the agnostic position for some reason. So I kind of actually looked into it so I could get back into religion because I was comfortable with that. but I ended up going the complete opposite direction. So
Isn't that the way it so often plays out?
yeah, which it boggles me how somebody can be an atheist and then turn into a Christian or whatever else. So
I've often asked myself that question. I honestly think it's about comfort. I mean, or maybe they had taken so much heat as an atheist, they just got sick and tired of the cultural consequences, so they thought it was easier to play ball. But I've often wondered, on the rare occasions you hear about someone who is an atheist going back into the faith, I often think, well, I think it gives comfort, that person, and this is totally a subjective single person's opinion, but I think they're looking for the security that they had in the faith. They're looking for that assurance, the emotional sort of balm of feeling like someone out there is in control, and that to them, they decided to re-enter the matrix. They'd rather taste a juicy steak, even if it's a fantasy, and be a part of that culture. So I don't know.
Or maybe they just weren't a true atheist.
You did it wrong. You did it wrong.
Yeah,
I appreciate you. I appreciate your call and for being a part of the show today. Anything else before I let you go?
Well, actually, yeah, I wanted to tell you that I did get your book.
Thank you.
And I was super excited to get it. And getting the book, I kind of was hoping that after I read it, I could hand it off to some family members and that. But I don't know if that would be something that they would read. I was really hoping it would be. I mean, it definitely appealed to me and my fiance because we're both atheists. But after I read it, I was like, I don't know if they would look at it objectively. So,
I've had some people use it as a tool to communicate, right? I've had some people say, I haven't been able to articulate what's been going on, how I came to doubt, some of the struggles I've had, what I'm finding in the scriptures that I find to be unpalatable. And your journey is a lot like mine. I'm going to give the book to whoever, my mother, my father, a grandparent, a friend. And some people are comfortable doing that because they think it will be received. Hey, look, if you want to know how I got there, read this. But there are other instances where it won't be the right move, So if you don't think they're going to go for it, I honestly would just not. You're not going to hurt my feelings, and you do what's right for you.
Well, I mostly feel that way because of your usage of presenting God. I mean, you don't really say, God, when you mention him, you usually present him as, the invisible sky daddy or something like that. So I think they would be more offended by it than, coming to an epiphany. So,
well, and I do that for a reason. I think I do that because...
I'm not against it. I definitely like it. My fiance liked it. We wanted to read it at the same time, so I ended up reading it out loud to him.
You read it to him? That's so sweet.
You'd probably get a kick out of the fact that anytime that was italicized or in parentheses, I used a stereotypical Southern accent.
Whatever. So you channeled me.
Yes, I did. I'm like, this is totally Seth, but I should totally do
You did the redneck preacher. That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. And what's your man's name?
His name is Kyle.
Kyle. Well, tell Kyle thank you, and I appreciate you both. It means a whole lot to me. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, will do.
All right. Take care of yourself.
Yeah, you too.
I read the book to Natalie. It's funny. She had heard bits and pieces of it as it was being written, but as it came to fruition, it's sort of all of a sudden, we looked at each other and I was like, we're freaking getting married. She hasn't even read the book. And so what we did is at the end of the day, we just propped ourselves up and grabbed a reading light and a glass of wine. And over the course of a few nights, I read the book to her. And don't laugh because it was sweet. It was really sweet. But it's a surreal feeling, to read your own book in your own voice to your fiance is a weird feeling. It was weird, but in the best possible sense of the word. I appreciate everybody's enthusiasm, by the way, for Deconverted. I appreciate the fact that so many have responded to it. Not everybody's going to like it. It's the first-time author's attempt. I'm a communicator, but I'm no Hitchens. I'm no Dawkins. I'm not a PhD. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a guy. And I position myself as that in the first few pages of the book, that I'm just a guy. I'm just a guy who's finding his way like everybody else. And I was deeply immersed in the faith, and I managed to find a way out. And I wanted to articulate. It was sort of therapeutic to write it. And I also wanted to encourage other people to remind them that it's all right. I want people doing what I did when I read Charles Templeton's book, Farewell to God, and I was nodding my head going, yes, I can relate. Yes, that's exactly what I wanted. And finally, I wanted people who don't understand how someone like me could get where I am. Someone who knew me back in my KXOJ radio days, who knew me as a true blue, dyed-in-the-wool Jesus believer, could get where I am. Could pick it up and get it. If I have someone come up to me and they say, how did this happen to you? I can just read this. Take it. I'll see you in a few days. Just see you in a few days. The people have picked it up. It's funny, they've picked it up on Amazon. And then some people said that they listened to the audiobook and they bought the paperback as a companion, which is a tremendous compliment to me. And I thank you for supporting the book. It means a lot to me. I'm going to finish the show with just a couple of paragraphs from the final chapter because I think it draws a nice circle around the whole idea of rejecting religion, of being deconverted and embracing a reality-based existence. And that's coming up in just a few minutes. Area code 330. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
This is Taylor.
Taylor, thanks for waiting on me tonight. What's going on?
Oh, not much. I was just calling to relay my story like everybody else.
Yeah, please do. Tell me what happened.
Well, I grew up in a Lutheran household as well. It seems to be a common theme tonight. We didn't really go to church religiously, I guess, but I went to Catholic school as well, not out of any religious obligation, just because the public schools around here weren't all that savory. Anyway, I was really young, and my grandpa got really sick, and he came to live with us. And over the course of a couple of years, he just was degrading and ended up going into a coma. And it was my mother's father, and she was just a wreck because of it. And the last time I actually distinctly remember saying a prayer with any kind of sincerity in my life was one night I was praying, God, just wake my grandpa up so my mom will stop crying. And the next morning he was dead. It happened to be St. Patrick's Day as well, so it was kind of a double whammy. We were always big into St. Patrick's Day. It was a celebration for our family, and, asking God to make my grandpa better, and next thing I know, it's as worse as it can get.
So was it that traumatic experience that kind of rattled your cage and started you along the path of asking questions, or what?
Well, questions had happened before that. I was always like, well, why do we have to go to this big, expensive-looking building every Sunday? If God's everywhere, wouldn't it be better to go out in nature and be around his creation and all that kind of stuff? So, questions had been popping into my head before that against, the dogma, but the idea of God was still there. And then after that, it was just more of either he's not listening or he doesn't care. And that's what really shocked it's just the core belief of something.
It's probably a good way to say it, Either he's not listening or he just doesn't care. I remember thinking the same thing after 9/11. I was thinking everyone's talking about God. I'm like, look, even if he did exist, he doesn't give a shit. He's not, there's no God involved. So even if he existed, is this the type of deity that deserves my worship and allegiance? I think not. And I think that's a legitimate way of looking at it. If it's not a benevolent, involved God, a God that cares enough to participate in your life, what are you doing? Why are you jumping through hoops for this deity? It makes no sense.
Yeah. Well, also in hindsight, though, I have to say I don't really, personally anyway, this is just me, but I don't really care for the phrase "lost my faith," because using the word "lost" implies you're either looking for it or you're lamenting its absence. And the way I phrase it is the same way. You don't hear smokers say, I lost my addiction. It's I quit. I gave up. I kicked the habit. using positive language. Saying I lost my faith sounds so negative. I think that's another way that the theist community tries to keep us down. They make the idea of losing your faith
That's interesting.
such a negative thing.
You know, I don't think you can choose to not believe. I mean, we can convince ourselves of a lot of things, but in the deepest recesses of our mind and heart, I think we believe what we believe. It is really not what we control. I can't wake up and say, I believe in God. And there may be a day when you wake up and you realize, I don't buy it anymore. And in that way, I think it's accurate. I lost it. I was there and it's gone. But I take your larger point that it almost sounds like a conciliation, doesn't it? It almost sounds like a defeat. I lost my faith. I'm now less of a person.
Yeah, I can see your point too. I just when someone asks me about it, I prefer to phrase it differently.
I like it. I think that's an interesting point. I mean, there might be a better way to phrase it. There were some different instances of things like that where we phrase something a specific way that may sound a little bit conciliatory, like we're almost apologizing. Well, I had it, now I lost it. That's interesting. It's something certainly for us all to think about. Thanks for your perspective on that. It means a lot.
Yep. And also, I just wanted to thank you. I recently started my own YouTube series, and your last week's podcast was a big kick in the ass to get me off of off of the couch and actually doing it.
The Producers Workshop podcast we did.
Yes. I mean, it's really simplistic. I sent you a link to it on Facebook in a private message, but it's really simplistic. It's only my second video on there. I just wanted to say thank you for basically giving me that little kick in the ass.
Well, I'm not the only one out there hoping that people sort of take the reins. Thunderfoot has a video contest going on right now, and I believe there's a total of $10,000 in prize money up for grabs. It's going to be divided out and parceled out in specific ways. But the overall thinking is that we need more people out there who are having their voices heard. And
I had actually seen that. I made the channel before the contest even came up. I made the channel last October and posted, just one quick video on there. But I had seen that. I just I'm not as scientifically well versed as
now I get it
as he is. So.
No, it's just like I said in the podcast, play to your strengths. Whatever it is that you know, whatever you're familiar with, that's your voice. Don't feel like you have to fit into anybody else's cookie cutter, and start small and see what sticks, man. I'm glad you're out there doing it. Did you want to slug the YouTube page here, or do you want to wait until you've got more of a library of stuff?
Well, it's called Our Godless World.
Okay.
One word. And the series I just posted the first episode of it's called That's in the Bible. Okay. And basically I just take the absolute ridiculous verses in there that people might not realize are actually there, and I try to present them in a humorous but rational light. And the first episode is about the passage in Ezekiel that's talking about baking bread with human feces as a cooking fuel.
Now, wait, did I miss that one? Wait a minute, human feces?
Yes, it's there.
Googling that.
Yeah, it's supposed to be some kind of punishment or something because they were rebellious or something.
All right, I'm looking that sucker up. Human feces. All right, I'm looking that sucker up, man. I appreciate you listening. Best wishes with your channel, and keep swinging for the fences out there. All right.
Thank you.
All right, okay, catch you later. All right, it's amazing what you can Google in about 3 seconds if you have a computer in front of you here. Ezekiel 4:2, eat the food as you would a barley cake, bake it in the sight of the people, using human excrement for fuel. None for me, thanks. God. Ooh, no, none for me. Just more for others to enjoy. Thank you very much. I want to end, if I may, if you'll indulge me, the show with a few paragraphs from the final chapter of the book, Deconverted, because I think it draws a final circle around why we are standing up against our former faith, and why it's important to do so, why it's a battle worth fighting. It says, religion is the slammed door that keeps humankind from entering and enjoying this incredible age of discovery. It must be broken down and broken through. After all, shouldn't our goal be to live truthfully? Shouldn't we embrace a difficult fact over an easy fantasy? Won't humankind's problems be better addressed with our eyes facing forward instead of toward ancient texts and an empty sky? Aren't we better off as a species rejecting primitive books of magic and embracing our amazing technological age? After all, we are more equipped to examine our bodies, our minds, our origins, our planet, and the cosmos than any generation of humans in history. Think about it. Just a few decades ago, getting information often meant running an obstacle course for each and every answer to each and every question. You could certainly find what you needed if you had hours or days and lots of patience. But science books, history books, peer reviews, medical journals, and the lion's share of research-related information were often difficult to find and retrieve. Presentations from our planet's greatest minds used to remain mostly hidden inside universities and lecture halls. But now, thanks to the game-changing technology of the internet, the whole world is the lecture hall, and we're all invited to attend. Information, education, answers, discussion, debate, documentation, soft theories, and hard evidence are just a few keystrokes in a few minutes, maybe a few seconds away. Sure, there are different planes of knowledge and understanding, many of which are the domain of the expert, the career scientist, the PhD. But those of us outside those areas of expertise are no longer excluded from the discussion. We have the opportunity to learn and absorb and participate in ways never before possible. We don't have an excuse for not doing our homework, for digging deeper, for checking facts and figures, for pursuing genuine understanding. I saw a poster recently which summed it up perfectly. In the age of information, ignorance is a choice. If I might digress, there's another great line from Aaron Ra I heard in Arkansas at a convention that I've used a few times. He said, ignorance is not just what you don't know. Ignorance is also what you won't know. Back to the book. Now, more than when I was a believer, I look up and around at the universe and I truly feel a sense of awe. It's not some cheap bumper sticker, feel-good, look at the pretty sunset kind of awe. It's a genuine understanding that I'm a tiny speck living on a tiny speck inside a vast universe. But I'm alive, and I'm tremendously fortunate to draw breath during a period of fantastic invention and discovery. Thank you so much for listening this week to the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Coming up the next few weeks, we are going to talk about the targeting of children by the church. We're going to have a conversation with Matt Dillahunty of the Atheist Experience. I'm going to have a one-on-one podcast with a Methodist minister. That ought to be fun, and a whole lot of good stuff coming up in the next few weeks. Thanks for listening to the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. See you next time.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.